Hey guys, welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Isaiah. Today's a sad day and an exciting day all in one because it's the last day of Sink or Swim. I'm excited to see how the story ends, but at the same time, I've enjoyed it so much that I kind of don't want it to end. Have you ever read a book and felt that way? Let me know in the comments below, okay? Chapter 27, the final chapter. It was the end of October when we finally made it back to the U.S. They transferred me to a hospital in New York City, which seemed more like a giant warehouse, with rows of white beds that stretched out as far as I could see. There weren't any curtains or anything for privacy, but there also weren't very many guys in there. It was pretty lonely. I asked one nurse why there were so many beds for so few people. She paused for a minute and then said, "We're not supposed to say. But what they told us was that once we start fighting the Germans over there in Europe or Africa or France, we're going to need every one of these beds for the casualties that they ship back home. And a whole lot more, too." The rumor was that it would happen any day now. The invasion force finally going over from America to join up with the British and attack the Germans and the Italians somewhere on the other side of the Atlantic. The thought of this whole warehouse hospital full of casualties made my heart sink. We'd been waiting what felt like forever for the invasion force to be called up. But now that I'd been in the battles with the U-boats and seen what I'd seen and lost my friends, I couldn't get excited about more war, no matter what we were fighting it for. I knew it had to be done, but I just felt sad. Day after day in the hospital, sad and growing sadder. A week after I got there, a couple of Navy officers came to see me, each formally shaking my hand as they introduced themselves. I thought they were there to give me a medal or something, but that wasn't it at all. "Colton Graham, the shorter one?" Lieutenant Frost asked. Panic bloomed in my gut. "No, sir, it's Danny Graham." "No, it isn't," said the taller officer, Lieutenant Riles. "We know who you are. We've been in contact with your mother," said Lieutenant Frost. "Your brother is Danny Graham, and he's at home under her care." I knew there wasn't any use in pretending, and I realized I didn't care. More than that, I was actually glad they knew I wanted to go home. "Did she say how he's doing?" I asked. "Your brother, Danny?" Lieutenant Frost asked. He actually smiled. "You'll be happy to know he's doing pretty good, according to your mom. He came out of his coma and he's walking and talking, moving slow. That's about all we know. Sounds like he might be okay, but you're in a lot of trouble." Now I was nervous. I swallowed hard. "What kind of trouble?" Lieutenant Riles answered. "The kind of trouble you get into with your mother when you run away from home and join the Navy when you're 13, Lieutenant Frost added. "In other words, not so much in trouble with the Navy as in trouble with your mom. As far as the Navy is considered, a mistake was made, a mistake was discovered, and with you being sent home, a mistake will be corrected." Strobe showed up the next day to visit me. I was in physical therapy, trudging up and down a hallway with a walker to build up strength in my hurt leg. The wound had mostly healed, but the doctor said there was a lot of damage to the muscles and nerves and a lot of scar tissue. All I knew was it was hard to stand up for very long and hard to walk without something to hang on to. And they wanted me to be able to walk, or at least sort of walk, before they officially discharged me from the Navy. "Don't you look like an old man," Strobe said when he saw me. I had to laugh because I felt like an old man instead of 13 and a half. "At least they let you wear pajama pants and not just that gown that you tie in the back but your butt sticks out," he said. "Lucky me," I said. "You mean lucky us," Strobe said, shuffling beside me as I kept trudging along that hallway. The sooner I finished the physical therapy, the sooner they'd let me crawl back into my bed. Strobe spent the next half hour filling me in on how everybody was doing, or everybody he'd kept in touch with. They divided up what was left of our crew onto several different PCs that had also lost crew members protecting cargo ships on other convoys. Strobe and Chief Kerr were assigned to the same ship, and they were heading down to Norfolk, Virginia in a couple of days. It was gloomy outside the hospital windows, though that could have been all the dirt and grime caked on the glass. "Why Norfolk?" I asked. I knew it was a big shipbuilding port, and there was a lot of military stationed there. "Nobody's saying," Strobe said, "but we're all pretty sure this is it. The invasion force. It's finally going to happen. Probably in a couple of weeks, maybe even early November. Wish you could ship out with us." Strobe went on for a while, repeating all the rumors he had heard, speculating on what everybody thought the Allies ought to do, and when, and how bad we're sure to beat the Germans once we were there, wherever there turned out to be. "I'm betting on North Africa," he said. "A lot of people are saying that. Hit the Germans and the Italians there, then cross the Mediterranean and into Italy, work up to the rest of Europe, up to France. They call that the soft underbelly of Europe. Going in that way, or maybe we'll do that and go across from England too, hit them in two fronts. Everybody's got ideas about it. I'm just ready for it to happen." I asked what he thought the Donald Duck Navy would be doing. Our ships weren't big enough to carry troops or heavy weapons for bombing in enemies' defense from offshore. "Command vessels, definitely," Strobe said. "It's the only thing that makes sense. You got all these destroyers and battleships and transport ships and supply ships. You're gonna need some smaller ships to run around and coordinate it all." "Who'd you hear that from?" I asked. He grinned. "Chief Kerr. He told me that. He also told me to tell you he was going to come by and see you before we shove off too. He's been busy getting to know the officers and the crew on our new PC, but he said he wanted to check in on you." He paused for a second and then added, "He knows, by the way. We all know. About how you're not really 17 and your real name, and about your brother. Some Navy investigators tracked Chief down and asked him a bunch of questions about you, and that's when they told him." I gulped, wondering if Chief could still make me do push-ups or clean decks even though I wasn't in the Navy anymore. I figured he was furious with me. Strobe had to go, but he walked me to my bed from physical therapy first. I was exhausted and could barely drag my leg back under my sheets. "You take good care of yourself, Colton," he said. "I want you to get all well and out of this place. When we finish up with those Nazis, I'll come back here and you and me will go to another baseball game in the spring. Or else maybe I'll come visit you at the Outer Banks. I guess they'll be sending you home now that they know everything." "I'd like that," I said, meaning the thought of going home to Oak Rock and the thought of Strobe visiting me there when the war was all over. After Strobe left, I drifted off to sleep, something I was doing a lot of in the hospital, and had worrisome dreams about U-boats and silver torpedoes streaking toward our ship. I was on the lookout platform, trying to yell to warn everybody, but no sound came out. I wake up in a sweat, tossing and turning mumbling, vaguely aware that somebody was sitting next to my bed. Whoever it was put a hand on my arm to calm me, and then put a cool cloth on my forehead. A familiar voice, one I hadn't heard in months, said, "It's okay, Colton. You were just having a bad dream. But you're awake now, and I'm here with you." I took away the cloth and opened my eyes, not believing what I was hearing. It was Mama. I might have cried some before, but now I was particularly bawling like a baby as Mama sat there and held on to me until I guess I cried myself dry of tears. Everything seemed to wash over me. Lying there with her holding me, how scared I'd been, and how worried about Danny, how guilty I felt for running away like I did, and for hurting her, and for deserting her when she probably needed me the most. How angry I was at the Germans and their U-boats for killing Woody and Lieutenant Talley, and so many other guys on my crew, and how much all the anger had taken over the whole inside of me. Mama just stayed there and kept holding me while I let it all out. Then she told me, before I could even ask, that Danny was going to be okay, that he was out of his coma, which I already knew, and a lot more. He did have some kind of brain injury, but he was slowly regaining everything they were afraid he might have lost, like the ability to walk on his own and talk and feed himself. "He's such a strong young man," Mama said, sounding a lot softer than I'd heard her sound in years, probably since Dad died. "I believe he'll eventually be all the way back to how he was before the incident." She told me the Navy had contacted her when we got to port, and I was transferred to the hospital since she was listed on Danny's enlistment paperwork as next of kin. That was how the truth finally came out. People on Oak Rope took up a collection to buy Mama a bus ticket to come up to New York to see about me. She stayed for 3 days, but had to go back before I was formally discharged from the hospital and from the Navy. A couple of different officers came by one day, this time to officially chew me out for lying about my age and pretending to be Danny and putting my fellow sailors in harm's way. The one who said that, a captain, was snarling the whole time he talked to me, but the officer who was with him stayed behind when the captain left. "I read your profile," the second officer said. "I don't know what possessed you to enlist, or how you got past everybody, as young as you are, and as young as you look, but your chief petty officer went to great pains to let us know what a top-notch seaman you were, and that it was an honor for them to serve with you on PC-450. He tapped a folder he had been holding, which I guess contained whatever file the Navy had on me. "It says in here that you voluntarily dove into a stormy ocean to save one of your shipmates. And it says without your hard work and your diligence, PC-450 might well have sustained a direct hit on more than one occasion from enemy torpedoes." He saluted, and I saluted back from my hospital bed. "Fine job, sailor," he said, and then he did an about-face and marched out of the room. Chief Kerr came in to see me the next day. His face had mostly healed from where it had been burned, but I could still see some scars. He got on me about lying about my age, too, but he couldn't keep a straight face while he was doing it. And finally he just started laughing. "I knew you were underage, but I had no clue that you were just barely a teenager," he said. "You got some serious guts, I can tell you that. Some very serious guts. I'm just glad you didn't spill any of those serious guts out on the deck instead of that little scratch you got there on your leg." "Little scratch!" I exclaimed. "I can barely walk on it, Chief." He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "Take it easy, son. Just messing around with you a little bit." He got kind of serious. "You were a good sailor, no matter your name. I wish I'd had a whole crew of men just like you. Maybe a little older, but just like you other than that." "Thank you, Chief," I said, "but I don't think we could have had a better crew." He nodded. "You're right about that, son." He got a faraway look in his eyes, and then he repeated it. "You're right about that." A week later, I was on a long bus ride back to North Carolina, and then a short ferry ride over to Ocracoke Island. My career in the Navy as a subchaser was officially over. Danny and I were both different after that. Mama said so, and I could see it for myself. Danny had problems remembering things that just happened, like if we'd just had lunch or if he'd read the newspaper yet that day. He got better over time, so that if you hadn't known Danny before, you wouldn't know that he was sometimes a little behind on everything. Answering a question, getting up to go when it was time, cleaning a fish he had caught. More than once I found him just standing and staring at what was right in front of him, as if he needed to mull over for a minute what he was going to do next before he did it. My leg healed okay, and I didn't have any problems with the weakness or balance, except every once in a while. My summer finally came again. Danny and I sat on the porch a lot in the afternoon shade, watching the surf, or on stormy evenings sitting out with Mama to watch the lightning dance way out over the dark ocean. We didn't talk much. Eventually I told them all about what happened when I left the island. But after that, we were mostly silent, worried about the war, worried about what would become of us all, and at the same time thankful we were all alive and safe and together again. I wanted to go to 8th grade, but since I was a whole year behind, they decided I would have to finish up the year in 7th grade. I didn't like that much. All the kids seemed so little and so young. But I probably would have felt that same way, if I was in my old friends too. Guess you couldn't go off to war and expect to feel the same about things and people when you come back home. Some days after school, Danny and I corralled our beach ponies and rode them all over the island, over the packed dunes, through the gentle surf, back along the edges of the marsh, and on the sound side. More and more fishing boats were venturing back out to sea. More and more cargo ships passed without escorts or convoys. We had never bothered to name our beach ponies, since they didn't actually belong to us or to anybody. They were just wild and used to be going around people and nice enough to let us ride them. I asked Danny what he thought of us giving them names now. He considered it for a few minutes and then said he guessed that would be all right. He hesitated again, thinking hard about something, and then asked what names I had in mind. "Woody and Strobe," I said. "Your friends?" Danny asked. "From your ship?" I nodded. It was funny how I hadn't thought of either one of them that way for a long time after I met them. But besides Danny, I couldn't think of any better friends I would ever have in the world. And that is the end of Sink or Swim. It's a super good book, tells a super good story, and like I said, even though it's a fictional story, it's based on a true story. There were countless soldiers who lied about their age to get into the military. Some because they were so poor and they needed the money, and others because they were so desperate to fight for their country. Again, I want to remind you that this boy that we just read about is just a couple of years older than you guys. Most of you probably have a brother his age. So, again, just learn as much as you can going forward. I want you to take every opportunity that you can to learn about every war that you can learn about. If for no other reason, just so that you can understand that freedom is not free. It was bought and paid for by the blood of millions and millions of soldiers throughout the last 200 plus years. I love you guys so very much. Have a great day. Bye bye.